I try to get them interested by seeing stuff that they've already seen before, but may not have noticed. Um, like um, I show a lot of film clips during my class, and um, we've already talked about Citizen Kane, but other periods of intensity in acting, and the things that you see in the way that a person like Kevin Spacey acts when he's angry or when he's really animated are totally different than what you would expect. In his own small way, Kevin Spacey does what I was mentioning. He throws the audience into confusion because his facial expressions don't match what he's obviously feeling. So it's looking at, that surprises people when they are, looking at this stuff and thinking of, I mean, when you show that stuff in a way that it's obvious that they weren't noticing the really important stuff, that gets people really, really interested in, figuring out why is it that I missed it all this time. Those are the surprising elements. But you teach people that the stuff that's right under their noses, but they haven't seen, that gets them interested in looking a little bit closer, looking a little bit deeper. And that gets people out of that narrow, you know, just paying attention to the technology. And they start getting interested into the acting and the emotions and the subconscious and the psychology that's behind a good performance, whether it's an acting performance or an animation performance. Look, most of what animation schools teach is how to animate, and it's with a very clear purpose there because animation schools want to have high placement rates for good reason. First of all, the animators who go to school and pay sometimes tens of thousands of dollars need to have a return on their investment. They need to get out there and be able to find good work doing this stuff. That's what education in animation is about, and that's for good reason. Okay, it's going. What I try to teach. I mean, first of all, it is absolutely essential, I think, to be able to be able to take a face and to be able to make it act, and that will make you a good animator, and you will get a good job, I think, doing this. But what you can't, what animation schools under very rare, only under very rare circumstances are in a position where they can start going into the real acting, the real emotion, getting some real power out of it. I think that's going to evolve. I hope that's going to evolve over the next few years, where we start to see, because when we start to see animation become more straightforward, the animation can become second nature quicker during the 3 or 4 years that an animator is in school, so that by the time that animator's in third and fourth year, that animator is starting to pay attention not so much to the technique of animating, but to being able to do performances, being able to think completely in terms of acting and the moves, the chops behind good acting. Uh, I would say, if I'm going to name names, I think the most phenomenal mainstream film that has come out in the last that I've seen, period, is How to Train Your Dragon. Absolutely, the animation in that, the acting in that, the storytelling, the technique, the look, the attention to visual details. I mean, yeah, I was quite blown away by How to Train Your Dragon. And what I understand about that process was that that film was in production for a very short period of time, only 1 year. And because it was in production for such a short time, it kind of flew under the radar a little bit. And the result that came out was, I think, a lot of risk taking in storytelling for a mainstream film. I mean, yeah, bravo. Um, what I haven't seen too much yet, and what I hope to see, are films of much smaller budgets. I mean, How to Train Your Dragon, Pixar films um, are around, in the $100 million range in budgets. Um, I, I want to see more films that are in the $10 to $20 million range, where there are smaller crews, more nimble pipelines, um, and um, more of an ability to take real risks with how stories are played out. I think once we get to that point, we're going to start to see some really weird films. When we're at a point where we're able to set up a small independent studio that does, a small film, we're going to see a lot of mixture between films that are done with, uh, films that are good and films that are not so good. Um, what I would, what I'm, my ambition as a filmmaker is to do a film with with the kind of flexibility that I mentioned, that explores some things. I mean, aesthetically and as far as animation and acting, which I haven't seen before, that deal with darker material or more absurd material, um, and grown-up stuff. I do, yeah, I like doing grown-up stuff. Well, I mean, right now in the United States or in North America, particularly in the last 3 years, there's been a lot of fear in making films, that there, the element of taking a risk is way down, with very few exceptions. Financing a film, particularly an independent film, and very much in particular an independent animated film, is extremely difficult, or has been extremely difficult to do in the last 3 years. And I mean, if you look at what uh, what is what has come out, um, you will see. I mean, a sequel, a remake, reimagining of a TV show, another sequel, part six in this case, and another a prequel, a remake. I mean, that is. I mean, we are flooded with that kind of um, safe stuff, and my feeling is that something is going to shift very rapidly. Like there's going to come a tipping point where something is going to come along and completely um, catch people by surprise. I think of back in 1999 when people were anticipating Star Wars Part One coming out. Like the huge amount of hype around that, and then suddenly this other film comes out that no one had ever imagined or heard of, The Matrix, and no one. I mean, it completely. I mean, as far as science fiction filmmaking was at that time, that completely blew people away and um, caused a little bit of a shift in the way that sci-fi films were thought of and done, and the visuals associated with that were, almost made cliche within 3 or 4 years of The Matrix coming out, by people imitating it. It was like that's every few years. That's the kind of thing that happens. Some people are caught by surprise in a good way.